Ladies and gentlemen, this is the final pairing in the United States Open Championship. The players are Jack Nicklaus of North Palm Beach, Florida, and Chris Mascaro of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mr. Mascaro has the honor. Play away, please.
Hey, next on the T Nation, thank you so much for coming back and tuning in to part 2 of this week's show featuring my conversation with Bill Mallon. Bill was a tremendous amateur player, 43 titles in all, including the Massachusetts and New England Amateur Championships, winning both of them twice, winning the Mid-Atlantic title, and he also won the New England Open in back-to-back years back in 1976 and 77, got through Q School, earned his tour card in 75, played on tour for a few years, then went back to school, and then earned his medical degree at Duke, which is where he played his college golf, and went on to become one of our country's leading orthopedic surgeons. Again, you're going to hear more detail about all of this in his intro and then during our conversation. But I can't thank you all enough. You guys are so great. You're the best supporters in the history of podcasts. I say that each and every week, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being here. Sit back, relax, let us take your mind off everything else going on in your life for the next half hour or so. But before we get started, I want to start off by reminding you about our wonderful friends over at 2 Under. 2 Under men's performance briefs are the unofficial underwear of the PGA, Ryder Cup, and President's Cup teams, and are sold in over 3,000 golf pro shops and golf specialty retailers nationwide. Ricky Fowler is their global ambassador, and over 50 other PGA, Korn Ferry, and Champions Tour players wear them. Just to mention a few, they are David Toms, Jerry Kelly, Justin Thomas, William McGirt, Scott McCarron, and Chris DeMarco. The Joey Pouch technology provides the ultimate male asset management, delivering maximum comfort from the tee box to the boardroom to the bedroom. Go to 2under.com to check out the bundle specials that offer substantial discounts for being a Next on the Tee listener. That's the number 2, UNDR.com. 2 Under, performance in your pants. I also want to remind you about our wonderful friends over at Squares Golf. Before I bring him into the show, let's talk about our friends over at Squares Golf. And folks, do you sway and you're off balance in your golf swing? You know what? It could be your shoes. A golf shoe needs structure to provide stability and reduce sway. How can you tell if your shoes lack structure and are hurting your game? If you can hold your shoes by the toe and heel and twist it, toss it. Squares was designed for the perfect balance of structure and comfort. Isn't it time you tried Squares? Try the new Speedbolt at squares.com. That's SQAIRZ.com. And don't forget, my friends back in the Berg, if you're from Pittsburgh or just love that blue-collar grit, Steel City's got you covered, literally. From vintage sports tees to iconic Berg designs, their gear is bold, local, and built to last. Check out their stores around Pittsburgh or head to shopsteelcity.com to rep the city in style. Steel City brand, built with blood, sweat, and steel.
Sure, this is golf, but so is this. And this. And this is definitely golf. And so is this. Hey, that's not golf. Oh, wait, yeah, it is. And no matter what your golf is, you're gonna need a store. No, a superstore. A place to get fit for a new club and walk out with it the same day. A place to find the perfect fit. A place to do whatever this is. Because this is golf. And this is Golf's Superstore.
Now back in Next on the Tee with me is Bill Mallon. Let me remind you about Bill's background. He's from Paterson, New Jersey, but grew up in Framingham, Massachusetts. Later moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina. His father was a competitive cyclist. Bill attended Duke University and majored in mathematics and physics, and he played on the men's golf team in Leonard from 1970 to 1973. He helped them to top 6 finishes all 4 years in the ACC Championship. He was named a Ping GCAA All-American in 1972 and 73, and was twice voted one of the outstanding college athletes in America. Individually, he finished tied for 6th in the 1972 ACC Championship and 4th in 73. He won 43 amateur titles, including the Massachusetts and New England Amateur Championships twice each, and one Mid-Atlantic title. He also won the New England Open in back-to-back years of 1976 and 77. He went through Q School and earned his PGA Tour card in 1975 and played out there through 1979. His best finish was a tied for fifth at the 1977 Tucson Open. He played in the 77 U.S. Open at Southern Hills. Following his PGA Tour career, he went back to Duke and earned his medical degree, and he is now one of our top orthopedic surgeons in the country. He's been the medical editor for Golf Digest since the late 1980s. He is also an Olympic historian. He's written several books on that topic and co-founded the International Society of Olympic Historians. And I couldn't be more honored he is back with me again this week here on Next on the Tee. Hey, Bill, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
So, Bill, I want to start off by going back to 1977. You were telling me that year you and Gary McCord played the fastest round in PGA Tour history. It was at Harbour Town. You guys played it in 1 hour and 26 minutes, which is amazing. Tell us that story.
Yeah, we both made the cut and both played lousy on Saturday. So we were last and next to last on Sunday morning. We were off as a twosome. Back then they played threesomes on the weekend, but it was an odd number, so we were a twosome. And the next tournament was Greensboro, which was near Duke, and I had friends there. I just wanted to get up to Greensboro and get out of Hilton Head. And so I was thinking I wanted to play really fast. And when I went to the practice team the next morning, Gary was there, and he turned around to me and he said, "Hey, I want to get out of here." He says, "I got a flight." He says, "Let's try and play really fast." And I'm like, "Okay." He said, "Let me see how I start out before." He goes, "We can break a record." And I said, "Well, let me see how I start out." And then on the first tee, I hit my drive left out of bounds. So I turned to Gary. I said, "Okay, let's go." So we started running, and we zipped through the front nine. I guess we teed off about 9, and we got to the 9th green at like 9:45, and the people on the putting green couldn't believe we were there already. And on the 10th tee, and now we've got people following us. A lot of young kids are running alongside us outside the ropes. And on the 10th tee, the woman that was carrying our scoreboard with our scores on it couldn't keep up. She said, "I'm can't keep up with you guys." So some young kid came out of the gallery and carried it for us on the back 9. And then we got to 11, and Dusty Murdoch came up, one of the PGA Tour officials, and he said, "Hey, Beman heard what you're doing. He's really pissed." He says, "There's a best effort clause." And Gary goes over to him and he goes, "Listen," he says, "Mallon hit it out of bounds on the first hole, and I 4-putted the 9th green, and we're both only 3 over. We're playing better than we have all week." And Dusty didn't say anything. He drove away. And then about 2 holes later, he comes back and he goes, "Hey, we just found out CBS loves this. They're filming you, so go for it." Like a hole later, on 15, we're running down the fairway, and we were jogging between shots. And we're on the 15th hole, and Ken Venturi comes running up alongside us with a microphone and starts interviewing us. And all of a sudden, after he asked Gary a couple things, Gary says, "Can't talk now, Ken. You got to run." And he takes off and runs ahead of him, which had to be. Gary didn't run, so this was killing him. And I've told Gary ever since then that he got his job with CBS because of that interview with Venturi. And so he owes that to me, which is probably not true, but I at least tell him that every time I see him. So anyway, we finished in 1 hour and 26 minutes, and we both shot about 75. And I got to Greensboro that afternoon, and CBS ran it on the show that afternoon, is what I heard. I've never seen it. I never saw them do it, but
So, Bill, it's interesting because I went back and I looked at the money and how that tournament finished out, and Jim Masario, who finished 2 strokes ahead of you, won a tidy sum of $345. But they didn't list you and Gary as having won any money for that tournament. Was there something weird about that?
No, we won money. I don't know
Okay.
why, but they didn't list it. I've got my PGA Tour media guides from back then. Back then you got about $500 if you made the cut and finished last. And if you, like in the position we were in, if we'd gone out and shot 66, we'd have made about $600. So you really couldn't make any money the last day from the position we were in. So we just wanted to get out of there. But yeah, we made Harbour Town then was an invitational. There wasn't any qualifying for it, and all the invitationals, I think they even actually paid money if you missed the cut at the invitationals.
Hmm. So let's contrast with what's going on around the PGA Tour today, because we're seeing rounds taking 5.5, 6 hours. Players are getting frustrated with the pace of play. They're letting their feelings be known. What do you think? And when you watch a PGA Tour event and you see that play is not as certainly not never anywhere near what you guys just did, but talk about what your thoughts are around the pace of play on the PGA Tour. Is there something you're seeing that they need to do differently?
Well, I think they just need to speed it up overall in general. I watched the Memorial this weekend, and Ben Griffin. I remember on one hole I was saying, "Come on, hit it, hit the ball, will you?" And I shouldn't criticize the guy. He's a heck of a lot better player than I ever was, and does a lot better than I was. But uh, sometimes I think they overthink it. Again, I hear the caddies and them talking. My caddy and I never talked about anything like they're talking about. I'm just not sure that they can hit it as precisely as they're trying to make it sound like they want to hit it, like to the nearest yard. I think they can get close to that, but I don't think they can get it to the nearest yard still. So I just think they need to speed up everything in general. I don't have any specific, one stop shopping to make it better, but
Yeah.
it is too slow now.
As we look ahead to next week's U.S. Open at Oakmont, did you ever have an opportunity to play Oakmont?
I played one round there, but not in a tournament. I was driving through, and we had a chance to stop there, and I got out, and the pro said, "Yeah, you can play it. You're a tour player." So I did play it. Hard course. It was not like set up for a tournament or anything when I played it, and the greens were still really fast. They keep them fast all the time there.
The USGA always sets a U.S. Open site up to be very challenging, where par seems to be the score that they are trying to get everyone to shoot. Today, you posted on Twitter a quote from Sandy Tatum, who was the USGA president back in the 70s. And he said at the Open in 74, we're not trying to embarrass the world's best players. We're trying to identify them. Do you think a U.S. Open, do you think the USGA does a good job of that? Do they straddle the line good enough, or we're finding who the best player is that year, or do sometimes they go over that line?
I think sometimes they go over it, and I think the USGA will admit that. David Fay, who used to be executive director of the USGA, is a good friend, and I remember talking to him after one of the opens, 10, 15 years ago when it was at Shinnecock, and he said it got out of hand. He said we went over the limit on the way we had the green set up. So they admit that, they realize that, but they are trying to make the course really hard. I don't fully agree with that. Um, you know, you mentioned that I do all this stuff with the Olympics and track and field. The USGA says, well, par is the mark of a good golfer. So we have to set the course up so ridiculously hard to make it so nobody shoots under par. In track and field, it used to be a 4-minute mile was the mark of a good miler, where now the world record is like 3 minutes and 43 seconds. Everybody runs under 4 minutes now, but they don't make the track harder. They don't put hurdles in the middle of the track or, obstacles for them to run around. So they'll run a 4-minute mile. They just accept the fact that, runners are faster now and better, and golfers are better and can shoot lower scores now. So I think the USGA has to accept that to some degree.
When Ernie Els won the U.S. Open at Oakmont in 94, the heat that week was off the charts. You had a similar experience when you played in the 77 U.S. Open at Southern Hills. How'd you deal with the heat and the humidity in Tulsa that week?
Well, it was brutal. The one thing I remember was on, you tee off Thursday and Friday, one day in the morning, one day in the afternoon. And in the morning round of those, and I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday, I left my hotel that morning at like 6:30 to get to the course. And there was a bank in back of the hotel with one of those time temperature signs, and the temperature on it already said 84 degrees at 6:30 in the morning.
Wow.
You can imagine what it got like later that day. Now, I didn't wear a glove, and a lot of times I actually wore tennis wristbands when I played if it was really hot because I didn't wear a glove to keep my hands a little drier. that week, I not only wore the tennis wristbands, but I kept soaking them in water on almost every tee to get them really cool to keep my hands as dry as I could. Was the one thing I did. I didn't mind playing in the heat except for that. Keeping my hands dry was the only problem I had. I actually liked it when it was hot. So I managed it. I've played 2 tournaments in Tulsa in my life. That one, and when I was 16, I played the International JC Junior at a course called Shamrock Country Club. It's got a different name now. It's still there, but the name is different. And the 2 hottest tournaments I've ever played in were those 2 in Tulsa. And when I was 16, I came down from Massachusetts where I grew up, and I'd never seen heat like that at that time. It was like, this is ridiculous. I'm coming from Massachusetts where, half the time in the summer it's 68 degrees for a high temperature. And I get to Tulsa and it was, off the charts hot. So, but I dealt with it.
Hubert Green won that 77 U.S. Open. He did so at 2 under. In the first segment, I had Joe Inman on, and he talked about what a great chipper Hubert Green was. I think you had an opportunity to be around Hubert several times. Talk about Hubert winning that U.S. Open and the player that he was.
He was a tremendous player, and he's not really given the credit. He won, I don't know how many tournaments he won on tour. He won about 10. He's not quite a Hall of Fame player. He's one of those guys people say, well, he's in the Hall of Very Good. And, he's definitely that. The thing that a lot of people don't remember about that, he won that tournament. And in the 4th round, there was a death threat against him. And the USGA found out about it after he teed off on the first hole. And they informed him about the death threat on like the 12th tee or something like that on the back 9. And gave him the option to stop playing and, come back the next day. And he bravely said, no, let's play, let's go on. And he was able to concentrate well enough to go ahead and win the tournament. And it was close. I mean, he didn't win by a ton. I think Lou Graham was 1 shot behind him, but showed some balls to, do what he did to win that tournament under the death threat.
As I mentioned in the intro, and you mentioned a few minutes ago, you're an Olympic historian. As such, were you glad to see golf come back into the Summer Olympic Games?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a little bit to do with it. I mentioned David Fay before, the USGA executive director. David actually asked me to be a consultant for the USGA back around 2000 to try and help golf get back into the Olympics. And I helped them set up their original bid to try and get back on the program, which would have been for the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, and it failed. They didn't get on. But then one of the reasons they didn't get on was the PGA Tour didn't support it. But the PGA Tour later came along and said they did want to have golf in the Olympics, and they sort of did the consulting by themselves. I didn't really do anything on the second bid. So I guess they did better without me.
And Bill, the Winter Olympics are my favorite. I'm looking forward to the games in Switzerland next February. Do you have a favorite Winter Olympic moment or story that you'd like to share?
My favorite Winter Olympic, thing is Eric Heiden in 1980.
Yes.
Winning his 5 gold medals in speed skating. Obviously, the 1980 U.S. ice hockey triumph is unbelievable. That's number 1. But my father, you mentioned, was a national caliber cyclist. He was a national caliber speed skater too. And my wife and I were thinking of going to Lake Placid to go to the Olympics in 1980. But then I said, why don't we get the tickets and get them from my parents and send them? And we did. We got I knew one of the guys on the organizing committee at Lake Placid, and he got us tickets for speed skating every day. And my mom and dad got a bed and breakfast outside of Lake Placid, and they went and they watched everything. And he got to watch Eric Heiden skate all of his races. And the upshot of that story was my dad died in 2000. And the night before he died, I was in the hospital room with him, and we were just talking. And one of the last things that he said to me he thanked me for those tickets for the Winter Olympics, and then he just smiled. He said, "I got to see the greatest speed skater of all time." And then he said to me, "Bill, I got to go to sleep now." And he never woke up. So that was
Wow.
just about the last thing he said to me. So pretty happy we got those tickets for him.
No doubt.
So, you had Joe Inman on earlier, right?
Correct.
I got some Joe Inman stories. You want to hear those?
Please.
Well, I have two good Joe Inman stories, but one of my favorites was in the late 70s. Joe went to Wake Forest, and we were on the putting green. I think it was somewhere, and Wake Forest was going to play Oklahoma. I think it was in Napa. We were there, and in football, and Oklahoma then was like, the number one program in the country. They had Greg Pruitt, Joe Wiley, Steve Owens, the, Wishbone T. They used to gain 600 yards a game rushing. And Wake Forest is not a football power. So Joe and I'm just making fun of this game to Joe. And there was actually no line on the game. It was such lopsided game. Las Vegas took the game off the charts. So I said to Joe, Joe, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 55 points and I'll take Oklahoma. And he goes, "You're on." So we bet $5 and I won. Oklahoma beat him like 63-0. My other favorite story was that Joe told me was when he was a sophomore or junior at Wake Forest, Lanny Watkins was a freshman. And the first time he played with Lanny, he got on the first tee with him, and the foursome was Lanny Watkins, Joe Inman, Jack Lewis, and Leonard Thompson. And Jack Leonard Thompson and Inman the year before had probably been the three best players in the country in college. And Inman and Thompson went on to win tournaments on the PGA Tour. They were very good players. And Watkins was this very heralded incoming freshman. And Inman said, Lanny got on the first tee and looked at us. He goes, "Let me tell you guys something. If I'm playing good, I can beat all you guys. If I'm playing really good, I'll beat your best ball." And Inman just cracked up laughing and then said, "He was right." So Lanny did not lack for confidence. He also was an incredible player.
Yes, he was. You made yourself into one of the top orthopedic surgeons in our country, and you were so for many years. I recently had my right ankle replaced, and I nor anyone I knew, oh, by the way, heard of ankle replacements. We didn't even know it was a thing until they presented that option to me last year. But I wanted to get your thought. Talk about how far we've come medically with joint replacement surgeries and getting, average people like me and then, superior athletes back to where they were with these kinds of surgeries, and oftentimes pretty quickly.
We've come an incredible way in almost everything we do in orthopedics. I wouldn't say we get you back to the way you were. Usually my patients used to ask me, "Can you make me 100%?" And I would tell them, "I'm very good at this operation, but I'm not as good as the guy who made your joint in the first place." And that's true. We never really get people back to normal. We just improve their quality of life. Joint replacements started in the early 1950s in England by a pioneering surgeon named John Charnley, who started doing hip replacements. He really pioneered that. And John Charnley was actually nominated for a Nobel Prize in medicine for his contributions, although he never got it. And knee replacements came along in the early 60s. And by far, hip and knee replacements are the most common joint replacements. And shoulder is third, which is what I did. I was primarily a shoulder surgeon. And shoulder has become really the fastest growing because of some new technology on the shoulder replacements that we do. Ankle replacements were done in the 70s and early 80s. I remember hearing about them when I was a resident in the 80s, but they were kind of panned because they didn't do very well. And so we sort of stopped doing them in the late 80s and the early 90s. I never actually have seen an ankle replacement. And around 2000, they started developing new models and new technology on the ankle replacements, which it's now become a very popular joint replacement, and it's done very well, certainly doing much better than it did in the 70s and 80s. Every part of the technology's improved. The materials that we use for the prostheses, the approach, the way we do the surgery, it's all improved. And it's amazing what we can do now as opposed to what we can do. I was a resident in the early 80s, and I talk to residents now, and I tell them some of the stuff we used to do, and they just almost roll their eyes and say, God, this guy's old.
And Bill, in the past, you've weighed in on Tiger's numerous surgeries. Over the last few years, we've seen him struggle to even play 4 rounds of golf, and he's had 2 body parts that have been fused now in his back and his ankle. A couple months ago, we all heard about how he blew out his Achilles tendon. All the invasive surgeries that his body has had to deal with, and other parts having to compensate for what has been going on, with him physically. Do you think we're going to see him be able to be competitive, play 4 rounds of major championship level golf at some point?
No. I just think he's had too much at this point. And I know Tiger is probably the greatest player of all time, although I might vote for Hogan or Nicklaus, but it's close. I think it's certainly one of those 3. And the stuff Tiger did with his body was amazing. But, he's just had too much. I mean, he's got an ankle that was arthritic, and he had to have fusions around that ankle and foot. His back has been fused multiple times. Now he's got an Achilles tendon tear. I just think it's too much, especially Tiger's close to 50 now. I think he's about 48.
Yeah, 49. He'll be 50 in December.
Yeah, I mean, you don't recover at 49 the way you did at 29. Each year it gets harder. A good friend of mine last year told me, the guy who's a few years older than me, he's close to 80. He said, Bill, they tell me 60 is the new 40, but let me tell you, 80 is still 80. So, as you get older, you just don't recover the way you used to. I really don't see Tiger ever being competitive again at major championship level or even PGA Tour level.
Bill, you're a wonderful follow out on Twitter. Let our listeners know about how they can do that and stay up to date with what you're doing and get your insights.
Yeah, I enjoy Twitter. I have fun playing some of the stuff on there, but my handle is at BamBam1729, and they can follow me there. I don't have a Facebook page anymore because it got hacked, and unfortunately, I can't get back into Facebook. I even tried it a few weeks ago, but they won't allow me back in because it's the same email. So I'm off of Facebook, but Twitter's really the only thing I do.
Well, Bill, it's always so enlightening and so much fun when I get the opportunity and the privilege to get to spend some time with you. I hope you'll come back and join me again soon.
I'm happy to do that, Chris. Thank you.
You're the best. Take care, Bill. All the best to you and your family.
Okay, you too. Bye.
See you, Bill. That is the great Bill Mallon, folks. How great was that story about giving his father tickets to the 80 Winter Olympics so that he could go watch his hero, Eric Heiden, win those 5 gold medals? I'm choked up when I was listening to it, and I'm choked up thinking back on it. What a great story. My goodness. He is just a special human being. And what a great player Bill was. 43 amateur titles, Massachusetts and New England Amateur Championships twice each, winning the New England Open in back-to-back years in 75 and 76, and then going out and playing on tour and being a part of a U.S. Open, and then becoming one of the leading orthopedic surgeons in our country. I mean, unbelievable. What an unbelievable life and career Bill Mallon has had. And I still feel like there's a lot of stories in there that we haven't touched on yet. So I'm excited to hopefully get Bill back on the show a little bit later on in this year. And I hope you enjoyed that segment as much as I did. My goodness, I enjoyed that. Listening to his stories and getting to know Bill a little bit better. Like I say, hopefully we get the privilege of catching up with him again soon. All right, my friends, it is time for me to put a bow on this edition of Next on the Tee. I want to send out my sincere thanks again to Joe Inman, Dr. Bob Winters, and Bill Mallon for joining me. Next week, I'm going to be back home, right, in Pittsburgh for the U.S. Open. I'm going to be at Oakmont on Wednesday, and then at the Pittsburgh Brewing Company for their watch parties on Thursday and Friday. Scheduled to join me in their tap room are my friends from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review and Trib Live, Justin Labarre, GM over at Trib Live, and their CEO of Trib Live, Jennifer Bertetto, will also be joining me, plus Rachel Gill from Pittsburgh Brewing, Top 100 instructor Eric Johnson. You know how much I love E. He's going to be there. Robert Morris, men's golf coach, and a great friend of the show, Steve Shingledecker. And remember, Steve and E, they went to high school together, so boy, that's going to be so much fun to have those two guys as part of the show. My long-lost cousin and director of golf at Alpine Country Club over in New Jersey, John Mascari, will join me as well, as will 2011 Senior Open champion Owen Brown. One of the all-time great instructors in our game, Jim McLean, is going to stop by. Former PGA Tour pro Nick Hearn will join me as well, as will Erica Lennard of Steel City Apparel. And, of course, our resident director of instruction, Tom Patrick, could pass up that opportunity, so TP will join me as well. So, folks, it's going to be a great time and an amazing show. If you're out there local and you're around the Pittsburgh Brewing Company, please stop by and tune in if you're not going to be around there, because it's just going to be so much fun. I can't wait till we do the show next week. I want to thank our friends again over at the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, speaking of those guys, for hosting this show on their site, for coverage everything going on in Western Pennsylvania, including your favorite sports like the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Go to triblive.com, and you can find the show by then clicking on the sports section tab, and you're going to find the most recent episode right there front and center for you on the homepage of the sports section. Or you can click on sports and then podcast network. You'll see the Next on the Tee logo. Click on that. And many of the most recent episodes from this season are going to be right there for you as well. You can also find this show over on Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Player.fm, GolfNewsNet.com. And folks, as always, the great folks over at Good Pods have been so good to me and this show. I can't thank them enough for making this show one of their recommended podcasts. So please download their free app and stream your favorite podcast right there from your favorite device. But like I say, each and every week, most of all, my sincere thanks go out to each and every one of you for being the greatest supporters in the history of podcasts. I appreciate you all so very much. Until next week, hit 'em straight, my friends.